G'vod President Berman, Dean Rabbi Penner. I didn't want to give a joke, so perfect. Honored and revered Rosh Yeshiva and Rabbeim, fellow Musmakhim and distinguished assembly. As I stand before you today, wondering what we are celebrating, I am reminded of a childhood moment when Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, spoke at Young Israel of Woodmere. The main shul sanctuary is a spacious base Knesset and is where I grew up davening beside my grandfather of blessed memory, with my father and beneath the watchful eyes of my grandmother and mother upstairs. It was the place that I received the Shalshelas HaMasorah. I had never seen the room quite like this. The shul was filled to standing room only. While I don't remember all the details, I remember Rav Aaron was speaking about a pasuk in the beginning of this week's parsha. Vayesrotetzu abanim bekirba vatomer emkein lama ze anochi vatelech lidrosh es Hashem. In response to an internal struggle between her soon-to-be twin boys, Rivka Imenu questioned her purpose in life and went out to seek out Hashem. As a teenager, I did not grasp the nuances of Rav Lichtenstein's passionate drasha, but I do remember how it felt to be in his presence, how it felt for a community to come together and respond to Kavod Torah, and how he charged all of us to seek out God in our lives. After all, when posed with the questions like, what is my purpose in life? And why am I here in this world? Lama ze anochi, Rivka reacted with two distinct yet complementary actions that led her directly to Hashem. She began with aspirational movement by walking, vatelech, allowing her to arrive, focus, and ultimately search, lidrosh, until she found Es Hashem. Both of these stages of anticipatory halicha, movement, and established drisha seeking were necessary in her journey, and perhaps they can be effective in ours as well. At this critical juncture in our lives, reflecting on how we each arrived at today's Chag HaSemikhah may in fact help us map out how we can contribute to Klal Yisrael moving forward. It would seem that a Chag HaSemikhah is not a celebration of completion or accomplishment on our part. Our work has just begun. Yes, we may have passed our bechinos, spent time in the Beis Medrash, but today has to be something more than just another graduation. Instead, it is a celebration of all the moments, people, and influences that brought us into this very room. Who were the role models that inspired us to travel, vatelech, along a path that led us here? For as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a rabbi. In my first grade All About Me book, I described my life in detail. My house, my family, my hobbies. And on a page when many others wrote policeman, firefighter, or doctor, I wrote, one day I want to be a rabbi. That moment in time says much less about me in my first grade than it does about the Rabbeim, the Morot, the teachers, and others who served as my heroes to follow in their footsteps, behalicha. They exemplified for me that seeking a life of meaning and purpose in the rabbinate should be the answer to my lama ze anochi. Why am I here in this world, and what is my purpose? To all those summer counselors and advisors, teachers and Rebbeim, community leaders and Ramim, philanthropists and organizational leaders, lest you think that years of devotion and effort on behalf of the community may have been for naught. We are here today with a resounding answer to any moments of doubt you may have had. Not so. Today's celebration is for you, because each Musmakh in this room has had role models along our lives who have ensured the trajectory, the halicha that we took, landed us in this room today. While we certainly credit the aforementioned list of devoted role models, none of us Musmachim would be here without our beloved Ritz, Rosh Yeshiva, and Rabbi. Today we celebrate you. Just as Rivka coupled her movement, Halicha, with a life-changing act of Drisha, searching, we Musmakh have been incredibly blessed to have landed in this yeshiva. With core Torah values, not only in word but in action, our Rosh Yeshiva have carried us on their shoulders and have modeled for us what it looks like to be a Doresh Hashem. You have taught, inspired, listened, and guided us with compassion and brilliance, spending hours of your time explaining, answering, and assisting in our Drisha, our search for Hashem. In 1974, the Pidyon Haben, Rav Soloveitchik, in a stirring and poignant description, shares how Talmudic scholars of old and new unite to continue a generational conversation. At the end of this majestic speech, the Rav spoke about himself and the redeemed baby in terms that speak to the very role that our Rosh Yeshiva have embodied and personified through our years at RIETS. We belong to the same Masorah community, said Rav Soloveitchik, where generations meet, where hands, no matter how wrinkled and parchment dry one hand is, and how soft and wan the other hand is, shake and unite in a community where the great dialogue continues. When I was looking at the baby who was redeemed this evening, he said, I don't know whether he will be in my class, whether I will live to have him. But someone will sit and teach the baby. And the baby is already a member of the community of the great Masorah community. Rav Soloveitchik, we are the babies of the next generation and can tell you that your students, our Rosh Yeshiva and Rebbeim, have done just as you predicted. They connected us with you and with your father and grandfather and earlier in guiding us to seek out Hashem. They connected us with a Masorah that they themselves received. But, and I must be clear about this, their impact and influence is made not just on those sitting in this very room. The community at large is indebted to our beloved Rosh Yeshiva and Rebbeim. Rashi explains based on Chazal that Rivka, in her time of need and despair, went lidrosh es Hashem, by seeking out the Chachmei HaMasorah of her time in the yeshiva of Shem ve'Ever. We too have witnessed in the months since the original date of this Chag HaSemikhah, how our extended communities came to our Chachmei HaMasorah, our Rosh Yeshiva, for guidance and support. You have collectively carried us and our community as a whole, and as we seek Hashem out in our lives. Again, today, we celebrate you. So how should we move forward, Vatelech, outside the walls of this yeshiva? The Ramban in Dvarim, Perek Yud Gimel, connects Rivka Imenu's Vatelech movement to the charge of Acharei Hashem Elokeichem Telechu, that we should walk in Hashem's ways, in Matash Yodei. Chazal and Gemara Sota, Yudalad and Aleph, teach us that we can replicate actions attributed to Him. Clothe the naked, visit the sick, comfort the mourner, perform acts of chesed. In addition, Abba Shaul explains in Gemara Shabbos that we can mimic Hashem's midos, characteristics. Ma'hu chanun v'rachum, just as Hashem is gracious and merciful, af atah hayeh chanun v'rachum. So should we act graciously and with mercy. While taking these divine inspired steps, halicha, we can pay forward the opportunities we received by teaching, guiding, and connecting with our students and congregants with graciousness, mercy, and with acts of chesed. We can walk in His ways, inspiring others to do the same. But Derisha requires more. The Ramban, commenting on Rivka's Drisha, writes, V'lo matzasi Drisha eitzel Hashem rak lihispalel, that all Drisha seeking must include tefillah. When Moshe Rabbeinu described his roles and responsibilities in Parshas Yisro, he says, Ki yovo elai ha'am lidrosh Elokim. Klal Yisrael come to me, says Moshe, with a variety of requests to answer halachic shaylos, to navigate complicated disputes, and to teach them Torah. But the specific request of lidrosh Elokim required Moshe lihispalel al choleim, to daven on their behalf. Rav Moshe Feinstein similarly describes requests like these made of him in Igros Moshe, Yerodei Chelek Dalet Siman Nun Aleph, Sheboim in she'elai levakesh she'espalel alehem, LaHashem Yisbarach al kol tzara shelo tavo chas v'sholom. They come to me, says Rav Moshe, to ask that I pray on their behalf as well. Moshe Rabbeinu, Rav Moshe Feinstein, our Rosh Yeshiva, personified what it means to be a Doresh on behalf of Klal Yisrael. Well beyond the expectations and job requirements, there exists a role for a rabbi that requires extra energy, extra effort, and most importantly, deep care to daven on behalf of our people. Being a rabbi is much more than just a job. It's a life mission and calling that requires our full selves, not just our minds and aspirations, but our yearning hearts as well. Like tefillah, this avoda shebalev asks us to search within and to do ever more on behalf of Klal Yisrael. If we can combine halicha and drisha, our minds and our hearts, here to lead, we will have successfully answered the ever-pressing question, Lama ze anochi. May we be zoche to do just that. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov.